It's not just about lines of code. It's not just about shipping things. It's about like, okay, as is always the case in business, it doesn't really matter about the activity. What matters is the outcomes on the other side.
Hi, I'm Matt Egol, host of the CX and Culture Connection, the podcast for leaders looking to drive impact by focusing on their customer experience and culture together. I'm excited to talk today with Scott Brinker, who's been referred to by Ad Age as the godfather of Martech. Scott's been writing the Chiefmartec newsletter for nearly 2 decades, which reaches an audience of over 80,000 leaders in marketing operations, and IT. Thanks for coming on the pod, Scott.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's always a lot of fun. And you've got a really interesting bird's eye view across the whole ecosystem, and I'm sure have lots of great perspective on everything going on with AI. So thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, looking at it from the bird's eye point of view, it's a little bit chaotic down there.
Yeah. Well, I hope that doesn't make the rest of us worms that the birds are going to come after.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So, you've been following the evolution of the marketing and media ecosystem across multiple waves of investment. How has the explosive growth of generative and agentic AI catalyzed new opportunities to drive value from investments in marketing and customer experience?
Yeah, wow. Okay, that's a big question. You know, I'd say there was the first wave of this that's sort of coming to the end, which was the initial introduction of LLMs and generative AI. Spurred this actually re-acceleration of the Martech landscape. I mean, literally hundreds of new ventures launched with this capability, inspired pretty much every major Martech vendor on the planet to throw all sorts of AI features into their bucket. Whether or not people actually wanted or use those AI features, your mileage may have varied, but there's definitely this like explosion of like, okay, it's kind of the existing landscape, but let's just AIify the heck out of it. That era seems to have been relatively short-lived here, at least, by Martech epics, epochs. Is it epochs or epics? Anyways, whatever that word is, that age seems to be coming to a close, and this new one is like really about a shift in who are the platforms and products that marketers are going to treat as the center of gravity for their department, their operations. And at a very high level, I'd say it's into kind of 3 categories right now. It's the traditional MarTech platforms, the Adobe, Salesforces, HubSpots, all those, they're still alive and kicking. They have a lot of value to bring. But then we have the second category of just the AI platforms, and I will call them platforms because I feel like OpenAI and Anthropic, and certainly where Google's going, their ambitions are much broader than simply being the LLM that you call through an API. And then the third category, which is really fascinating, is the data platforms. Like Databricks and Snowflake. They've certainly played a role in the MarTech stack today, but are starting to actually move up the conceptual stack, of the capabilities and services they provide. And so you kind of almost got this like 3-body problem between this new generation of MarTech and the AI age.
It's interesting to use the phrase gravity earlier there. And what you're highlighting is that, and this is a phrase that like Salesforce and others have used a lot in the past about the data gravity and how people build around something that is a gravitational pull. Because you don't want to have to integrate data in too many places. You don't want to have to create too many AIs, too much custom coding. So the question is, what's the center of that universe? Was it the ERP? Is it the CRM? Is it the content management? Is it the data like the Snowflakes and the Databricks of the world? Like who has that kind of right to win of being the center of gravity because they've got everything else built on top of them? Is that kind of what you meant by gravity?
Exactly. And I think the challenge is Each of them actually has a pretty decent point of view as to why they should be the one to win. And in practice, we're actually seeing for most companies, there isn't a single winner. The architecture is actually this sort of weird interrelated balance, certainly between the data platforms and the business platforms, but increasingly also, yeah, what we think of as AI platforms and how much are they sort of the layer, the capability that marketers are turning to is the orchestration, the center of what they're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's another point here, if I could throw it in, which is, in the past, the whole gravitational argument has to do not just with like, ease of integrating all the data, but the cost and the complexity of building on top of stuff. And like you'd build an architecture that would have like a center of gravity around SAP or Salesforce or Microsoft or Adobe. And while you can mix and match different elements of the stack, you tended to have a dominant, strain of like with your technical debt. Like, am I more of an Adobe shop or am I more of a Salesforce shop or more of an SAP shop? Just in terms of where you're putting energy to do all the customization and integration, which could be, literally hundreds of millions of dollars as some companies of effort. Um, Now with AI, one of the things I wonder is like, are those costs of complexity coming down? Where the cost of building custom elements of, where companies becoming builders of solutions. I'm not saying they'll stop using these larger platforms, as you put it, but they might also build on top of them, with and that's what a lot of agentic, I think, is doing today, which creates threats to some of the companies because you have both boutiques and entrants coming in. It also means a lot of the services are becoming software also.
Yeah, wow, there is so much in there, almost all of which I agree with. Martech for
Feel free
the
to disagree with anything.
well, all right. So the Martech universe, as I've been tracking it for a couple decades at this point, it really had been leaning in the direction of being mostly a commercial environment. Not to say there wasn't always some custom development happening, particularly on things that are a little bit more customer experience facing. But for the most part, yeah, you talk about what people thought of as their Martech stack, and it was almost entirely a collection of commercial Martech applications and platforms. And I agree with your assessment that for most businesses, the preference was to sort of lean towards a particular platform as the backbone and the spine for that, like the way you say it, a Salesforce shop or an Adobe shop, a HubSpot shop. Um, but yeah, this wave of what AI has enabled from a building perspective, both for professional developers and builders, AI accelerated development. It's just crazy. People talk about the 10x and the 100x engineer, and knowing a few of them personally, it is wild to see what these people are. I mean, like if they know what they're doing and how to do it, it's incredible. But also, you've got, I guess the phrase has sort of caught on over this past year of vibe coding. You've also what we used to just call no code, but okay, let's come up with
Low,
a
low,
funny
low, no code. Yeah.
low code, no code, right, right. Now we call it vibe coding, but this idea that even for non-engineers, it is actually getting easier and easier for them to build specific things, for their particular workflow or, something that they want to execute. And so when you look at the mix in the MarTech stack between commercial and custom, it's not that the commercial layer is going away, but yeah, the relative amount of custom software in the mix seems like it's just exploding.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much here. Like one of the things that I'd like to push on a little bit is the ability to do stuff in house that used to be external. One of the things I've been involved in is agenticadvertising.org. I'm sure you've seen about the launch of AO. Randall Rothenberg, my partner at JourneySpark, and he used to be the CEO of the IAB, and he was the CMO at Booz when I was the head of digital practice there. And we've known each other for 25 years. And we got involved as advisors, Scott, at the launch of agenticadvertising.org on the strategy and the mission and the membership and the member value prop and the governance and standing up the board. And we're staying involved on thought leadership and running experiments with members and running a set of mastermind councils with the organization, like content effectiveness and data signals and retail media and other councils. And the whole point of agenticadvertising.org is an open standard AdCP, but that the members are all builders. And the idea is that there's brands, publishers, agencies, and platforms, like Salesforce is one of the founding members, um, that are collaborating together to shape the standard and the education and the certification and the networking and peer learning. But that we're all builders now. The brands, the agencies, the publishers, and the tech are all builders. They're still going to use platforms for a lot of stuff, but a lot of times the brands are going to build stuff directly too. And it's easier and easier to do it. I mean, with vibe coding, you can create a buyer bot in minutes.
Yeah, and I mean, that's even even if you think about what it's possible to do today with that, which is crazy impressive. Like a year ago, some of this stuff, theoretically was nice, but in practice, yeah, kind of fell down, and a year later, it's ridiculously impressive. Like agents are real. This is a real thing, and the ability for people to vibe code things that are not just toys, but are legitimate, business apps or agents. That's real. But boy, you look at the speed at which this stuff is continuing to advance and evolve. And, when you try and think about this through the industry lens of, okay, strategically, how does this shift the nature of the profession and the relationships of, the different kinds of vendors in the mix here, service providers as much as software providers, if there's even a distinction between them. Yeah, you're trying to play that out, how it's going to look over the next 2, 3, 4 years. And you're like, this is going to be wild.
But yeah, buckle up, right? Um, but look, I'm not arguing that the platforms go away by any means. I mean, look, in that world I was just talking about with the agentic advertising, yeah, you can create a bot to do buying bot yourself. You can also create a bot in-house to do content, versioning and create new content. But a lot of companies are going to say, I want to work with trusted partners, with platforms. They've got data. I will build and customize around it. So there's going to be a whole range of approaches take with being build, buy, and partner, just like we've always had with the Martech stack. And particularly when you look at, for me personally, what I love about the integration, the impact of agentic is how advertising and customer experience can come together more, because a lot of the data signals that you think about journey orchestration, like it's been very siloed between the website and the email and the mobile and the customer experience and the advertising. But the signals you want to use to optimize your advertising are coming out of your CX. They're coming out of what's happening in commerce. They're coming out of what's happening in your website and mobile experience, that you know who's there, you know about who that persona is. You can target them as a microsegment with lookalike, and you actually can start optimizing content versions and experimenting what happens in the ad and what happens in the commerce. That's where we're headed, which is used to take a huge amount of effort to do that, and big consulting projects and tech investment. What I'm so excited about is you're going to see way more innovation happening more rapidly with the companies doing a lot of this directly with the software companies. I pivoted my own consulting practice. I left PwC a few years ago, and I'm focusing now in JourneySpark on training and culture and leadership to help companies do stuff directly themselves.
Yeah. You don't know how happy this makes me. I feel like over, again, the couple decades or so that I've been in Martech, um, the very hard siloed boundaries that were treated between ad tech and Martech used to just drive me nuts, and it wasn't because, hey, there are legitimate reasons of why there are actual distinctions between those environments and how they came up. And I'm fully willing to acknowledge that. But it felt like we were not willing to rise up to a level beyond that to be like, okay, how do we just actually, I mean, like, it's not like there's a advertising department, chief advertising officer separate from the chief marketing officer. I mean, the goal is, how do we, find, win, delight, engage, customers? And it just always felt to me that there was so much opportunity, just even from a strategic thinking perspective of how do we get these things connected. And some people did, but for the most part, boy, those worlds just lived in like completely different dimensions. And you're right, it is now those things are blending. I think the language of signals is one of the reasons why. I mean, it's signals from one side feeding the other and vice versa. And certainly AI and this ability to be able to tailor and customize how some of this is actually working within an individual company's environment. Yeah, it's becoming possible. And what's so exciting about this is I feel there's a whole range of like strategies and tactics for how to incorporate that into go to market that, yeah, companies have never really engaged with before. I think it's going to be an incredibly creative time.
Well, I'd love to bring this into a little bit more tangible opportunities and get your thoughts about what you see as some of the hot spots where AI is going to have the biggest impact. One of the key themes I've talked about with a lot of guests is how much experience, customer experience is actually content. So like, when you think about digital, like the website, the mobile app, the social media, the average, it's all content, right? So ultimately, if you look at customer experience, you either have a content-based experience digitally, or you have a human to human experience. I mean, increasingly, you have both, and you're bouncing around between the two, like pinball, right? It's not a linear experience; it's more pinball. What do you see as the key superpowers for AI to change how brands approach content-based experiences? How is AI affecting the ability to create, target, optimize? Because these content experiences have been siloed, not like we were just talking about. So how is AI changing this, that now we can actually improve the optimization of content?
Yeah. I think I'd look at it in three components. There's the actual, content creation itself. But there's then sort of the scaffolding upon which, like, okay, how are we actually choosing to deliver particular content at particular moments? And then there's maybe this third level, which is sort of the intelligence, to close that loop of like, okay, well, how does doing that actually impact individuals and segments and whatnot? On the content side itself, I know that's kind of the first place where everyone went with, Gen AI, and for better and worse. I think that's also given us the term AI slop, contributed from that.
By the way, Randy and I like to call it creativity versus crap, where we spell crap CRAIP, and
Nice. Nice.
crap is just a fun play on slop.
Yep. I completely buy that. I will say one thing about content. If you're going to frame everything in the digital world around content, which I think makes sense, I would say traditionally we think about this as like, I don't know. I'm going to bastardize this thing, and you may disagree with this thoroughly, but I'd always sort of thought of it in the classic Marshall McLuhan like media messages. Like, okay, the content has messages, but like where we actually choose to display it, becomes part of that as well, too. So messages and media, but to me, what has always been exciting about digital is I do think there's a third dimension to that, which, just to keep with the alliteration, I call mechanisms. It's the fact that this content is not purely something, like, seeing an advertisement in a magazine or, watching something on TV, that it has functional capability, or it can have functional capability, and, people can interact with it, and they can get services and value out of that. And that has traditionally been something that actually a lot of content organizations don't fully appreciate. And to some degree, it's because, like, okay, creating your own mechanisms and building that and adding that has actually been fairly hard. But this is one of the areas where I feel like AI, as with everything else, software wise, is just making it easier. Sometimes this is known as interactive content, but I just think of it even as like anytime you deliver an experience, thinking about the functionality as an inherent part of the messaging you're actually giving
Well,
to people.
what you're saying is really profound because, like, in the past, we talk about integrating the content into the advertising, so more integrated approach that it's like it feels more like you get the brand halo of the environment you're in if your content is integrated into it. Um, and so like that was one way of making it more immersive. You're also talking about this how the interactivity, the experience makes it so like it's not doesn't even feel like it's advertising. It just feels like it is the experience, right? And I think generative AI is a great example of this, where if you're engaging with the with Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini, and you're having a conversation, that's organic, that's real. It is the experience, but the advertising will be integrated into that, and a lot of it will be native, right? So it also begs the question about whether the future is not so much a website but an agentic interface.
Yeah, I think, this is the challenge at this moment in time. There are so many fundamental things that we've just sort of come to accept as like, okay, well, this is the way this works. And maybe we tweak it and incremental changes here. Yet so many things at this point in time, you're like, well, wait a second, there actually could be a really fundamental rethink of what this is. And yeah, I think the website is actually a great example where even if you I mean, let's just go down that rabbit hole for a moment. Say there's two audiences now we're fully acknowledging, to our quote unquote website. There's the humans and there's the agents. And I do think the humans are still going to come to these sites or experiences or whatever they become. But there'll be a whole bunch of agent interactions happening too. So part of it is you're thinking about how do I design these digital properties in a way that they can serve the agents as well as the humans. But even for the humans, that classic way we've just thought for like 30 years about websites of there's information architecture and here's the navigation and this is the structure of the page to something where like, yeah, actually these experiences can be truly generated. And they can be generated in a way that feel much more like a conversation. So, I mean, the text box conversational chatbots or whatnot, you can do a lot with them, but I think everyone sort of feels like, okay, that's not the be all and end all, of what an experience can be, So if you imagine just sort of the flow that we see with these conversational text-based experiences, but the ability for that conversation to render itself in ways that are much richer and visual and include a much wider range of content elements and engagements. Oh my goodness, yeah. I mean, this becomes a very different kind of website or experience, or I don't even know what we should call it. It almost feels like calling it a website feels like it doesn't do justice enough to the just our fundamental rethink that might be in a position to occur.
Yeah, I mean, it has such a huge impact too. Um, I mean, a lot just for the audience, the effectiveness. I'd love to get your take on this, Scott. The data that I've seen shows that the content effectiveness is 70% of the impact and 30% is the targeting. So if you want to look at like what the range of impact, focusing on the content and the effectiveness of the content, there's way more juice in the orange to improve the performance of the campaign than just targeting. A lot of analytics and data, because there's data there and there was support for it, put people to put a lot of energy in AI initially against targeting. And now what we're seeing is that generative AI is opening up a lot more opportunity on the content effectiveness side, which you can get a 2 or 3x lift on. I've been involved in optimizing, creative campaigns. You do 100 versions of the ad or 100 versions of the content on the website, and you literally double the conversion by having the right content for the right persona supported by data. So you insert the right content based on a signal. And you can double the lift. It's like in a store, if you have the right display, you have 2 to 4x lift. Now we're seeing that creative impact can happen, which the fusion of creativity and data. creativity with AI in it, creativity. That is creativity versus crap, right? That's what Randy and I talk about. Is essentially you're fusing analytics with creativity to enable the right content for the right person in the experience, but you need a tech stack to deliver that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and again, you can appreciate why this is so disruptive, certainly to the entire, vendor service provider landscape, but also to just people in their careers. I mean, you talk about this fusion of creativity and analytics, which I fully agree in, like the power that, is going to unleash, seems like it's going to be incredible. But yeah, I mean, like we've grown up this whole industry where, you have creatives and you have analysts and like, wait a second, the hybridization, like, who are these people?
Well, the brand marketer of the future needs to be able to write code and be creative, right? They're not just writing a project brief for an agency.
Yeah. No, it's a lot like, this evolution. I mean, to me, I see a parallel between, in the software world of, product managers. It's like, yeah, you don't just do a PRD at this point in time. You actually, you build this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've mentioned Randy, my partner, a couple times. Let's take a quick break. I'm going to play a sizzle reel for the mastermind group I do with Randy, and another one I do with Tamara, and then we'll continue the conversation on the other side. Allow me to briefly interrupt the podcast to share an invitation for you to join one of our mastermind groups. These groups are for leaders building out the CX function at their organization. They are for culture champions looking to develop and sustain behaviors that bring their organization's mission, vision, purpose, and values to life. I'm excited to team with Randy Rothenberg, former CEO of the IAB, on a mastermind group focused on experience as a winning marketing strategy. I'm teaming with Tamar Cohen, who has led CX and EX teams at Zoetis and Travelers, on another group focused on CX EX alignment. Each group meets monthly for 90 minutes. Members receive a coaching hour each month and can attend quarterly workshops. Go to JourneySpark's website for more information. Please DM me on LinkedIn with any questions. Now, let's get back to the podcast. Scott, we're really having a fun chat about how things are changing. And we talked a lot about how the technology is evolving and that the walls are coming down. It's easier to integrate things. There's different players who are competing to be the base, the home base for that innovation for companies, the three different clusters you talked about. How do you think, though, about the way the world of the marketers is changing? We're just starting to talk about that. How does the work itself change to take advantage of this?
I mean, one of the ways I'd answer the question, when I go and I speak at different events, inevitably here over the past couple years, one of the most common audience questions was going to be like, okay, well, what does this mean for my job? Is AI going to steal my job? And the way I thought about it, again, this oversimplification might totally annoy a whole bunch of people, but I always thought of marketing in like three buckets. There was the strategy and creative, which is what everyone always thinks of as marketing. But in reality, a relatively small amount of the calories, went into that. The vast majority of the calories went into the second bucket of like the production and analysis work to deliver on that. And then there was this third bucket that was kind of off to the side of like the marketing operations and Martech capabilities supporting that. And I think my oversimplified view of this is where we are headed, or arguably almost already are with AI, is that production and analysis bucket is just being completely decimated from a like, how much human effort do you actually need in this versus leverage the
Well,
heck
in
out.
some of the early agentic tests, you can eliminate 80% of the hours.
Yeah. And so, yeah, if you're thinking about, your job as being in that sort of production analysis thing, like, yeah, there's a real risk there. But one of the reasons why so I think the other two buckets, though, are actually growing tremendously. I mean, even in what we just talked about earlier here, have barely scratched the surface of what we are going to be able to imagine and execute on in strategy and creative now. And I also think because of the importance of getting the systems and the infrastructure right, and I don't think it's a trivial thing to do to support all that incredible, reimagined strategy and creative, that marketing ops, marketing tech role, is going to grow in value too. I think the reason why I am pretty bullish on marketing careers overall is because for any executive who looks at that compression of the production and analysis bucket and just says, oh, great. All right. I can just cut these heads and I'm good to go. There's absolutely no competitive advantage to be gained there. I mean, every single company on the planet is going to get that efficiency gain on the production and analysis. So the question becomes, how are you going to compete? And it's really going to be companies, I think, that find ways to lean in on either the strategy and creative or, the Martech infrastructure supporting that, or really the two of them. So if you want a career in marketing, it's kind of like, at least one of those two paths, lean in and get really good at what this technology is making possible.
Totally. And, we're highlighting here is that where you're shifting from a world of authorship to orchestration,
Mhm.
you still need creativity. You still need the idea, whether it's for a product or a website experience or a marketing campaign or a call center experience, any experience, a Salesforce interaction, human to human, your frontline employees interacting with a customer, that won't go away unless you're Netflix. Like there's still humans involved somewhere, probably in a lot of businesses. Um, the there's still designing a great experience, there's designing great content, there's designing great experience, and then there's orchestrating it and making sure the agentic systems deliver a great experience, and then measuring the impact and improving the system. So I think the humans are really critical. It's just the work is changing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do think there are some parallels to what we're seeing in the software engineering world where, you have mediocre engineers who just like let loose, a bunch of agentic development. You end up with the software equivalent of AI slop.
Yeah.
But when you have like really talented software engineers who are like leveraging this stuff, that's where you're truly getting this like 10x to 100x acceleration. And again, it's not just about lines of code. It's not just about shipping things. It's about like, okay, as is always the case in business, it doesn't really matter about the activity. What matters is the outcomes on the other side, and those great engineers, like they have a clarity about what they're wanting to execute, that's going to deliver value to customers or the business, and they know how to manage that agent force, not Benioff's agent force, the broader agent force, that agent force, to really be able to deliver that well and keep it well managed and provide governance to it. And so I do think that is a parallel, to marketing. Yeah, less, it's less talented sounds cruel, the less engaged marketers in this thing here. Yeah, they'll produce a lot of stuff, but it's dubious what the effectiveness of it is going to be versus those who like really like they've got it by the reins, and they're driving this forward. I think they're gonna have an absolute heyday of what they're able to create in this world, and I think it will be a huge competitive advantage.
Yeah. So how do leaders navigate this shift? They've got, you said, different levels of talent in their teams. Hopefully they're a strong leader themselves and they've got members of their teams that are driving that 10x impact you're talking about somewhere in their team. How do leaders navigate the shift to the other side? Like what makes a good leader to help make, drive this transformation?
I think there's two things I'd like to see more of. Or again, when I see leaders who I think are doing a really phenomenal job with this, they tend to have two traits that are really the right ones for this moment. One is they're actually hands on with this stuff too. I mean, the nature of how we build up large organizations, marketing orgs, but others too, is, that's sort of hierarchical, management layer after management layer. It's just one of the side effects of that was just you get higher up and you just get more and more disconnected, from what it was. But, you know, since you probably over your career journey had started at the bottom of that pyramid, perhaps you had enough relevance of, you could make those calls. I think because so many things are shifting at the actual execution layer, that if you're a leader and you aren't actually spending time hands on really working with this stuff, it's just easy to be disconnected from this. And I think it's very hard to lead people through this transformation when, you don't really understand it yourself. Um, and then the other trait I think is just, more important than ever is the empathy. It's actually become one of the things that really does annoy the hell out of me, in the SaaS industry right now is, when you have some of these leaders who do their big post on LinkedIn if I've just cut, 10, 20% of my staff, because with AI, we can redo all this sort of stuff. And the fact that they did the cut and that they're realigning around how do we reorganize this on AI, I actually don't have a problem with that. It's probably what you should be doing. But the smugness by which some of these folks seem to like just sort of take this thing of like, yeah, okay, well, I don't need those 20% anymore. And
Or the recent like kerfuffle over a couple executives who referred to the lower quality human capital. It's like,
yeah,
who talks about their teams that way?
I mean, that's just crap.
Yeah,
Without the AI, or maybe with the AI.
a different type of
And
crap.
at the end of the day, I think those companies are going to lose because one of the things I think has just become more and more important with this explosion around AI is trust. Trust with employees, trust with customers. And when you demonstrate a complete lack of empathy as a leader, people don't trust you. And
Well,
not just your
you
employees,
know,
like I don't think your customers trust you in that mode.
well, you even if you care about results and you're a hard-nosed, brass tacks kind of person, like it's got to get your attention that what are the statistics from like MIT and Gartner? MIT said like 40% of Gen AI initiatives will fail, right? And Gartner, I think, said like 95% of initiative. Oh, I think I got it backwards. 40% of agentic initiatives and 95% of generative AI are not delivering the ROI they expected. Between MIT and Gartner did those two recent studies. It's really high, no matter how you look at it. And the question is why? Why aren't people? You say so. People say they're going to cut costs. They're going to do this. A lot of those efforts will fail, and the costs will come back, or they'll lower the quality of the experience or lower the quality of the business and they'll end up having costs come back, where they'll have an impact on customer churn or employee churn or other things. It's like the same reason we've had with CRM or ERP or other large technological initiatives. If you approach it as a technological implementation to just go hit a target, often it doesn't succeed. It requires a lot of focus on change management and culture. And this is the CX and culture connection, the podcast, after all. So like, why does culture matter? Because culture eats strategy for breakfast. If you don't pay attention to culture, your change will fail. And I think the same is true with a lot of these AI initiatives. The leaders who don't engage and actually lead through the change and think a lot about the way they engage their teams, the way they redesign the work, the way they involve their teams, the way they communicate, the way they drive behavior adoption. If they don't do all those things and upskilling, the efforts will fail. It'll just be another shiny technology that doesn't get adopted.
Yeah. And I think it's one of these things where trust is not a single shot game. Like trust in the market, again, the employment market, talent market, but yeah, the actual market with your customers. Um, and so doing things that are short term appear to have like, oh, well, this is a short term benefit for me. And this helps me look good with my investors yeah, it very well may help you in some narrower window of that. But the problem is you're not playing for, a 30-day round. Or maybe you are playing for a 30-day round. But, I mean, anyone who actually wants to be in this business and, build companies that last for years or decades, you have to like just think through the second order and third order effects of these things you're doing. And I'm sure there actually are a lot of leaders who are, and I know several who are, but boy, this sort of fashion is of late, particularly, within like LinkedIn posts of whatnot, of people who just seem completely disconnected from that. It kind of drives me nuts.
Yeah. There are leaders who want to get it right, and they want to engage other leaders in their organization to collaborate on getting it right together. One of the things I'll pop up on the screen, Scott, is something I've been working on with a couple other recent podcast guests called the Leadership Experience LX Accelerator, which is all about how to get leaders to engage together on intentionally driving the right leadership experience they want in their company. And I have a formula I like to use for value. So you can see on the screen, www.lxaccelerator.net. Go and check it out. It talks about, as a leader, I'm trying to blank. What are you trying to do to drive change? And one of them is to drive adoption of AI in your organization. And how do you get that right? We have some tools around how to help you go through that journey on the site. And Simon Robinson and James Killian were a couple of recent podcast guests that I'm collaborating on the LX Accelerator. So I encourage folks to check that out. In addition to my past conversations with Simon and James, be sure to check out our upcoming episode that's coming out later in June, and be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. And reach out to us if you have any questions. Scott, as you look ahead, the next 3 to 5 years, what part of the Martech landscape do you think will be most transformed by some of the stuff we're talking about with Agentic and generative AI?
I think the thing that's interesting is, for a long time in Martech, we've looked at this as a competitive struggle among a relatively narrow set of marketing specific platforms and companies. Adobe, Microsoft, Salesforce, HubSpot. You could go a little bit wider there, but those are probably the largest examples that come to mind. And while I absolutely still think all of those platforms are going to be here for quite some time, and they're evolving, and the service they actually provide, in the organization is in some ways broader, in a world of agents and humans. But I think they are now going to be competing with these data platforms, the Snowflakes and Databricks, and ones coming out of the cloud platforms like Google BigQuery and Google Cloud, where that sort of center of gravity, I think is gonna there's gonna be real struggle as to, like, where is that primacy? And then I still think these AI platforms, OpenAI and Anthropic, their next moves, beyond just the core LLM to, these like harnesses and frameworks and structures and things that surround those. I think that's going to be a part of that too. And so, to me, like, the biggest change that's going to be in the MarTech marketing environment over these next few years is that three-way. I think of it as a three-body problem. That three-way struggle between those platforms is going to have a huge impact on how you think about, like, your architecture and your capabilities, and like, how do you lean on one more than the other. So that's what that's the one that has me at the edge of my seat.
Mhm. I mean, I definitely think that it's probably something where people are innovating and building on top of one or some combination of those three areas, like where maybe there's a longer pole in the tent for one of the three, but people are innovating and building on top. So a lot of the stuff that people are vibe coding and building sits on top of data and other feature functionality that's in one of these platforms. And a lot of what we see with, like, people creating new innovative solutions are built on top of them. Like, so just like it's like the Apple and the App Store, or Salesforce with tons of solutions that get built on top of Salesforce, or Adobe, or SAP, or the Qualtrics marketplace. There's a whole bunch of, environments that people are innovating on top of the data and the technology. I think you're right. The LLMs make that easier to do. They create another ecosystem to build on top of. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Scott. I've definitely enjoyed our chat. You sparked a lot of great ideas for me. I'm sure you have for the audience. If folks wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to sign up for your newsletter, to get in touch with you?
Yeah. So newsletter.chiefmartech.com. And of course, on LinkedIn, just SJ Brinker.
Thanks so much, Scott. It's been great chatting.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Love this conversation. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.